talking about building hot rods here. We're not talking about sugarcoating. We're talking about everything. Knuckle busting. The rust in your fucking eyes. We're talking about building fucking hot rods. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Episode 5 is coming to you. And as always, this is the same podcast. It's all about the build. Brought to you by
I.B.F.HotRods.
Oh, yeah. Huntington, Indiana. You need something built? Come on down. You got me, Elliot Slack, and as always, sitting across the way is Randall Bunting.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So this week, if you remember from last week, we dove into if and when you were planning on buying your first project, things to think about. We talked about just the tips that you might need to hear before you get into it. We talked about what to think about instead of just pulling the trigger on the first Facebook marketplace find that you think is worth buying, and some ideas and concepts and definitely some things to think about before you bring it home. So this week we're going to follow up, and now we are talking about you got the vehicle home, Randy, and we are getting ready to tear into it. But the first thing we need to do is figure out what direction and why.
What are you going to do with it? What's your goal?
Right. The main topic here we're talking about is going to be if we're going to do a little custom work or if we're going to stick with the straight restoration. And we're going to go into some of the biggest differences and the controversies that come about when you start customizing things, and also if you're going to leave it nut and bolt and you're going to leave it stock. There's always that one ass clown that's going to be telling you did something wrong because he's Googled it 55,000 times or whatever.
Not even one. There's going to be a couple people. There's going to be a handful of people.
Oh, there's going to be haters.
Telling you did something wrong.
There's going to be haters on either side of the book. But we're going to go into that. We had somebody reach out to us over the week and asked us about sourcing parts and materials for their project that they're working on right now, and if we could talk about those things. And it just so happened this week, this topic that we're going to discuss, that's one of the main topics when it comes to restoring or customizing, because the two different directions that you can go are huge, and there's pros and cons on either side, but we're going to get into that.
You can also mix the two.
Right. You can also mix the two, but we're going to get into all that baloney. So basically, we're going to dive into a little bit of sourcing parts, finding specialty shops, the differences in managing each build as far as a restoration and a custom job goes. You got some big differences as far as a restoration goes and trying to make everything nut and bolt and exact the way it came off the assembly line as opposed to custom builds. And we're going to probably hit that topic pretty heavy in the parts description and the sourcing of parts and materials. But the last topic we want to dive into is going to be the different knowledge base that you're going to need, whether it's the nut and bolt restoration or if you go into a modern style. Randy, what's the word?
Restomod?
Restomod. That's the word. I like to call them just custom. Everybody in the world likes to call them restomod, but that's nowhere here nor there. So, without further ado, let's dive into the first topic and talk about the biggest differences here. Randy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the biggest differences between an actual custom build as opposed to a nut and bolt restoration?
Well, it's all about personal preference. If you're going to go with restoration, you're following a certain guideline of what the car should end up as. And what you choose to do needs to work its way around to get into that final product. When you're doing customization, you're kind of open to a lot of different avenues, and you have a large amount of freedom with the whole project. So if you're going to go custom, literally the sky's the limit with that one. But restoration, if you're going full nut and bolt restoration, you have to do what the car came off the factory as. And there's different tiers of that too. You can go, chalk marks and the right tires and the right parts that you have to source and locate to make that a period correct restoration. You can do a restoration that, somebody might have done back in depending on what the year of the model is, it could have been a restoration in the 70s or 80s or 90s, but not technically a nut and bolt restoration. There's kind of different tiers to that, but a custom car, you can just go however you want to.
I understand the argument on either side. I've worked on both ends of the stick. In my opinion, there's not a lot of people that are in the gray area that actually appreciate both of them. You got your hardcore custom dudes and you got your hardcore, concourse style. And then you got this crazy shit where you have to have the overspray in areas. And it takes a day, 2 days just to go over your entire car when it comes to actually for judging it.
Yeah, if you're looking for those type of awards, you need to look into that. That has to be on point.
Right. But if you're doing this in your backyard, I mean, I understand keeping it stock. I understand the feeling of that. If that's the route you're shooting for, it's all fine and dandy, but you got to remember, we'll go into the electronics for a second. We're looking at a 6-volt system as opposed to 12-volt. We're talking about a positive ground instead of a negative ground. And that shit can get confusing even for people that work around a lot of electronics. It's just a pain in the ass. In my opinion, just get rid of that shit. You can make generators. You can take a generator that's on something that old and turn it into an alternator. Convert it over and be a 12-volt system, and nobody would know the difference. And it's going to be more efficient in the whole 9 yards. You got different options as far as headlights and all that stuff, because everybody wants safety bullshit whenever it comes to restoring this stuff.
But if you're doing 12-volt conversions, you have to think about your gauges and the electronics inside the dash and everything like that, because all that stuff was designed to work on 6-volt, and you have to run a 6-volt or a 12-volt to 6-volt reducer. Yeah. So you definitely have to look into that kind of stuff, because if you don't, you're going to burn up your electronics.
Right. Well, not only that. So, I mean, there are places out there, out on the West Coast, there's a shitload where you can actually send out your 6-volt stuff and they'll actually transfer it over to a 12-volt system. So if you want the original gauges and things of that nature, you can get them rebuilt to a 12-volt system, which is pretty sweet, but it's going to cost a pretty penny. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier to source out new gauges somewhere else, depending on what route you want to go with that.
Yeah, and there are gauge companies nowadays that make products that are close to stock, if not almost very similar.
Yeah. They'll get away. You can get away with it.
You can get away with it. That's also going to kind of edge towards custom, because, there are people who are looking at it and they know what's stock and what's not. Sometimes you can get away with that kind of stuff, but sometimes you can't. It just kind of depends on, obviously, what direction you go.
Yeah, it's going to depend on where you're taking it. If you're trying to win awards with this thing, you have to go. I mean, if you're trying to win awards with a restoration and you're calling it a fucking restoration, you're going to have to go down the route of the headaches, the extreme headaches of trying to figure out where this stuff goes. If you end up going against the grain, like we talked about, and your first escapade is going to be that one of only 1,000 of them ever made, and you're trying to make shit exact, just finding information on restoring something the way it's supposed to be is a headache. Like, if you don't find the exact book from back in the day, then it's a crapshoot.
There's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many vehicles I've worked on that we're doing restoration style, and I literally have bought ridiculous amount of just Xeroxed copies of owner's manuals and mechanics manuals and shit like that, just so I can get the information I'm shooting for to put something together. And also, you got to remember, if you're doing this in your backyard and you just want to drive the damn thing, if you keep it bone stock, which is all fine and dandy, like let's say you bought something that is half decent and it's bone stock and all fine and dandy, don't expect that fucking thing to run anywhere near a new vehicle. You got to remember, if you bought something in the 30s, the speed limit was like 40, 45.
So
that was fast.
Don't be upset, when you're flooring it and you're doing 50 miles an hour down the highway.
Right, yeah. And the engine's fucking screaming. Yeah. At the high RPM level.
Most cars only had 3 speeds back in the day.
Yeah, so you got to remember what you're trying to do with this thing, this, and then if we're talking about custom, then you can just drop an LS in it and put a fucking transmission behind it and all that stuff, But even that
avenue, you got to be careful because nowadays going to be a big controversy with the custom side of things.
Oh yeah, let's get into it.
Huge custom controversy because, like you said, you can throw an LS in anything you want to, and that's fine and dandy. This might be your first build. If you can find an LS for $500 or so, if you're not going to run a carburetor on it and go down that route, then you need to do a computer system for it and all that jazz. But if you have a few extra bucks and if you're trying to spend a little bit of money on this thing to make it nice, if you have a Ford Falcon, say, Ford Falcon, if you're going to put an LS in it, nowadays, like back in the day, that's what you did. You found what you could find cheap and put it in just to make it faster or whatever. But nowadays, there's so much out there that, if you put an LS in a Ford Falcon, that's kind of, in my opinion, that's kind of counterintuitive because if you have the money to spend on something like a first gen Coyote, at least it's a Ford. Keep a Ford in a Ford.
Right.
Keep a Chevy in a Chevy. Yeah, you can get away with like an LS in a Pontiac. That's still GM, I guess. But you can make an LS look like anything nowadays. There's companies that sell kits that make an LS look like a Ford engine.
Right.
That's crazy. I feel like that's a big controversy nowadays. I feel like I see all these high dollar hot rods and they still have small block Chevys in it. I just don't understand that nowadays.
Well, I think if you bought a fucking car that had something nice in it to begin with, whether it's an inline six or not, depending on what you want to do with it. That's like if you're trying to stay bone stock and you got an inline six, well, fuck it, finish the inline six, make it right. Basically, the controversies you're going to get is when you start customizing shit, and people are going to bitch. That's what they do, but who gives a shit? Haters make you famous. And when you're looking at doing a nut and bolt restoration, you got some haters out there that are going to pick it the fuck apart. If that's the route you're trying to go and you're trying to be proud of something like that and you're trying to go that route, just be prepared. Somebody's going to tell you you're doing something wrong. And somebody's going to tell you, well, that didn't come in a 1931 Auburn. That was only on a 29. And
to go back on everything I just said, as long as it works for you,
right?
Go ahead and do it.
Yeah. All you got to do is just justify it in your own head when it comes to that shit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to do a nut and bolt restoration and you put anything on it that doesn't belong there, if you're trying to win some points and you're trying to say that this is a full blown, this is all original, you got to have your shit together, man.
And especially today, you have to be on your game with that kind of stuff. It's literally no joke.
Yeah.
Like when I've seen it in person, it's insane how perfect these cars are, and they're almost, I'd hate to say it, almost even better than what they came off of factory, but
well, they are absolutely.
But they're supposed to be how they came from factory, but
right. But nobody wants fenders and fucking doors that don't line up properly.
20-something years ago, it might have been a little harder to come across these parts, and then nowadays there's so many different avenues on how you can come across these parts, like Facebook, and it used to be Craigslist you can still find stuff, but nowadays it's more like Facebook groups,
marketplace and groups. Yeah,
groups. That's a big avenue, a huge avenue on how you can locate the parts you're looking for.
Oh hell yeah, we're going to get into that here in a minute, but that difference that we're trying to nail home here, outside of the controversies and justifying it in your own fucking mind, the freedom versus exact. The freedom is the best part about customization. You can do the old restomod and you can make it the outside look bone stock, the whole 9 yards, keep it all that, you can lower it and shit like that and just make it nice. And that's the route that I like. I'm all for nut and bolt restorations, but it's more of a fucking headache trying to find all the information and trying to make that thing perfectly fine.
That's a lot of work.
It's a shitload of work. And if that's the route you're trying to go, you got to remember what the hell you're trying to get yourself into here.
If it's going to sit on a platform for the rest of its life, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But if you're looking to drive the car, what's it really matter?
Right.
Just get the thing running and driving and enjoy the thing.
Right. There's only one way to get the damn thing running and driving, and we're going to have to dive into it here. Our second topic we want to talk about is the sourcing of the parts and the materials here. And the major difference in custom versus restoration is you're looking at an exact fit versus a custom fit. And the fact that when you're customizing something, the only information you need to dive into is if this fucking thing, you can make it work. and you have an understanding of how something's supposed to work. And in this day and age, everybody's put pretty much anything and everything into a vehicle, and as long as you have the right skill set when it comes to searching on the Google and shit like that, then you'll be golden. Plus, like we talked about last week, we talked about just call somebody and ask them. But when we're talking about sourcing parts, if you're trying to get something exact fit, specifically the guy that messaged me and was asking about this type of topic and to speak of this, he has I think it's a 53 Chevy pickup truck, 53 and a half, something like that. Anyways, I could be wrong, but I know it's the mid 50s, and it turns out he was messaging me a couple of times he had bought some wheels that were supposed to work out for him, and they did not. The hubcaps wouldn't fit on his wheels that he bought he was told would fit on his truck. And because of the way that they fit over top of the wheel, because they were the moons.
Yep.
And they lock onto the damn thing.
Did they have the little like tabs on them?
No, I think the wheel itself had those little, like 4 little flat spots on it.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That you literally just hammered on there. And then it had the second one that went around the outside of it. But basically what happened was he was told that this son of a bitch was supposed to fit his truck. Well, it turns out that year they switched the hubcap or whatever. You know what I mean? It was like that halfway mark. He had the one side or the other.
Man, I hate when they do that.
Yeah, so he was on, Marketplace or whatever, and somebody told him that it was right. But, when he messaged me, as soon as I started explaining shit to him, he was like, oh, fuck, I got the wrong stuff. So, the biggest thing as far as sourcing parts, as far as a custom job or a exact fitment type of deal, restoration, the only difference between the two is custom world, you can find whatever you need.
It really depends on where you buy it from.
Right.
I think.
Well, like you can go to Summit and you can buy the same shit on Summit as you can on A-Tech if you're familiar with A-Tech and stuff. Usually
A-Tech is usually for businesses.
Yeah, for business and shit, but it's all Summit. But then Summit buys shit from somebody else and sells it through their database. Mm-hmm. And same thing with body parts and all that shit. It's at the end of the day, you're pretty much buying the same damn thing. It's just where are you buying it from? Like you can get on Jegs and you can buy a fucking carburetor that's the same carburetor that's on Summit. And you can buy the same carburetor on fucking eBay. And you can buy the same carburetor directly, I think, through Holly and shit like that, And basically at that point in time, you're paying for either shipping, the difference in shipping costs, because one of them is free shipping. One of them's not free shipping. But as long as you know it's going to fit on your product, whatever vehicle you're fucking running, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, and depending on where you buy it from, I mean, if you have an account with them or not, you might be able to get a little bit cheaper here and there, but it really just depends on the brand that you trust and, I mean, if you used them in the past that you rely on.
Yeah.
It really comes down to that. But I mean, you can buy it from anywhere. I mean, you can buy it from Amazon.
Right.
If
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, as far like when you're talking about stock shit, then you're getting into a different type of category. Sometimes you can get away with buying like body panels and stuff like that through Summit or Jags or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time, like if it's like a 69 Camaro, it's going to be like Autometal Direct.
Yeah.
Autometal Direct sells a lot of sheet metal for a lot of common cars.
And Summit, actually, when you buy panels and shit through Summit, it shows up in a box that says something else, and then you open that box, and then that box says fucking Auto Metal Direct.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they work out their, bulk pricing and deals, however they do it, to give, depending on who you buy from, to give a better price as a consumer. If you're going to buy straight from Auto Metal Direct, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. Unless you have an account with them, that might be the cheapest route, but...
Right.
A lot of people don't have an account with Autometal Direct unless you're a supplier.
Well, a lot of times, if you find the part and it's the right fucking part, it's almost worth just buying it right now because the difference in price tag is going to be minimal. The very most is going to be like $50, but at the end of the day, that extra $50 is going to probably turn out to be free shipping
right
through somebody else. Mm-hmm. And you're going to pay the same fucking price. Even though it's $50 here, you get free shipping. But if you get something that's cheaper over here, it's not free shipping, but it's $50 cheaper and fucking shipping's $49.99.
I mean, typically that seems to be the way it works.
Yeah. I mean, you're saving fucking $10 or $12 at the end of the day when it comes to buying and sourcing parts.
Yeah, and it really comes down to what's worth it to you. Spend the extra time on searching a part at another website or whatever, rather than just buying it from the website that you're originally on for $50 cheaper.
Right. I mean, I'm guilty of that shit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's not even, a lot of the stuff isn't even my money. It's the client's money. And I've fucking wasted my own personal time trying to find parts and everything like that when I should have just turned around and done it to begin with.
And a lot of times that's what it comes down to. And as far as people who do this for a living, we learn that the more we do it, the more we know where to go and when to go there and what to buy from who. And we know that it's going to be worth it just to pull the trigger now rather than spend another 20 minutes looking elsewhere.
Right. I mean, you could be looking for, okay, let's think about this, that damn 67 C10 that we got in the shop. I bought everything that I could, and the right front fender is incorrect. They sent me one and it was wrong. And they told me that it was fucking right, and I had to argue with them about it. But it was on back order. And in this situation, literally, I had to search and search and search to find this damn right front fender, which is crazy because they got left front fenders out the wazoo, and for some reason the right front fender's gone. But it ends up, they only had this right front fender on a 67 because 68 they started doing marker lights. And I bought this fucking thing. It came in. It was the only one I could find because I literally searched 5, 6, 7, 8 different places trying to source this thing, and they're all on back order. And we're talking like into March of next year, which is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So I finally found one that I thought was going to work, and it shipped here. And guess what? It's for a 68 to 72, and it's got a marker light in it. Well, instead of sending it back, it's probably going to be more efficient. Cut that out and do some body work. But if I don't, I'm literally going to have to wait till next year to get this fucking front fender.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that you're going to most likely run into. You know, you think you're buying a part that should come, in a couple of days, but, the way things are nowadays, it might not show up for a couple of months.
Yeah. Outsource somewhere else or find a used one, Finding a used one on the old Facebook Marketplace. Like the problem with Facebook Marketplace is finding parts. And for one, like the guy I was just talking about, he bought some stuff and it turns out it wasn't it. Now, whether or not it was on the truck to begin with or not, he was told that these were going to work. These were for this truck, and turns out they're not. So that's the type of shit you're going to run into when you're trying to go restoration, because you're going to find stuff that's not supposed to be there.
And you have to know who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You have to do your research on the people that you're trying to buy from.
Right. And at the same time, if you did the proper homework on whatever the fuck you're buying, and you go look at the truck or the car or the motorcycle or whatever you're looking at, you're going to know that those are the wrong wheels. If you're trying to get crazy. Mm-hmm. Like before you buy the restoration, if you're trying to do restoration side, you need to have a pretty damn good idea of what you're looking at. Like if it's one of them, like this C10 is a 67, so that's the only one that doesn't have the marker light. So if you go look at a truck and a guy says it's 67, but it's got marker lights on it, is it a fucking 67? Or does it have 68 to 72 front fenders on a damn thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the more you run into that kind of stuff, the better you'll know.
Yeah, and okay, let's talk about GTOs and shit like that. Like, okay, I worked on a couple of early 70s GTOs, which you can buy. What's the baby to a GTO? Is that a Le Mans?
Yeah, Le Mans, the poor man's version.
Yeah, right. So you can buy a fucking Le Mans, but you can buy the whole front from fenders forward and turn it into a GTO.
Which is a clone.
Yeah, a clone, correct. But if you don't know any better, you buy that damn thing, guess what? You've just spent a hell of a lot of fucking money on something you didn't realize was not the fucking right thing.
I see it all the time.
Yeah, Chevelles are the same fucking way, man. What's the baby to the Chevelle? Malibu? Yeah, right. Same fucking thing, man. If you don't know any better, then you could be buying something completely wrong. And if you buy something completely wrong, and you think it's something completely different, and you're trying to outsource parts for it, well, guess fucking what? You buy something for something, and it shows up, and it's like, why is this not correct? Well, it turns out because you're fucking wrong to begin with.
This is you didn't do your research.
Right.
and you didn't find out what kind of VIN was for the vehicle you're trying to buy.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Correct.
The VIN number has to match the vehicle you're trying to buy.
Oh, yeah. Well, then we got into that last fucking week. We don't need to dive into it too much this week. We beat the shit out of that pretty good. But these are the type of things you got to look for when you're coming into like restoration shit. And same thing with that pickup truck that the dude reached out to us and was talking to us about. Turns out it had a little sun visor on the outside of the cab. Well, it just so happens that year, guess what? That year sun visor is like a rounded version or something like that. The other ones are more squared off or something. It's either one way or the other. So the only way you can find that one is year specific. Again, year specific shit. If you're trying to go restoration. Now, if you didn't care, you could either make it or you could buy one of the same era and make that one work. And it would be fine. It would still look good in the whole 9 yards because you're not trying to nut and bolt this thing to death.
And if you're doing that kind of stuff, be subtle about it. You can be subtle about it, and it still would look period correct.
Yeah, you get away with it. And that's the one thing about customization. You can be subtle about all this shit, but you can get this fucking car on the road faster and sooner. Be subtle about everything you do. Make it look good, and you're driving it a hell of a lot sooner because when we're talking about doing this stuff, we're talking about managing the build as well. And when you're sourcing parts for a custom project, it's a hell of a lot easier to manage this build than it is to do a restoration and manage a restoration. When you got this old fucking defroster system that you sent out, you got these gauges that you sent out, you sent the chrome out to get chromed, and you got to make sure all this stuff, like a lot of these things, you just send them out and you have no idea when they're coming back. So when you're trying to manage this build, it's like, yeah, whenever that gets here, I'll finish it.
Yeah, and unless you've been doing this for, decades and decades, and you know the right people to call at the right time, you're going to be talking about a lot of time waiting around for your parts.
Yeah. Especially if you're trying to do period correct shit, man. Like, you could be on the search for a fucking knob for a long, 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 long time. Now, when I was sourcing parts, okay, so I was working on a 1948 Chevy Cabriolet, okay, which, if you're not familiar with what a Cabriolet is, it's a convertible. It's a fancy term for convertible before convertible was called a convertible. It's a Cabriolet, okay? Now, 48, they made this car 42, 48, 49, or 42, 46, whenever. So they stopped because GM started producing tanks. So from 42 to whatever fucking year the war was over, they didn't make this car. So this car is a 42 to a 48, but it's 3 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most manufacturers were like that. I don't remember off the top of my head because I've had a couple of drinks when World War II was over.
Right, yeah. I don't fucking care. We ain't talking about that type of history.
I'm not a historian. I do know this. I just can't think of it on top of my head.
I don't give a shit. But so it turns out the only way this car... So we needed a donor, basically, because we needed panels because they only made them for fucking 3 years, man. And the metal that we had was nothing. But the crazy thing was, more specifically, we needed the trunk, the bonnet. Is it the bonnet?
The bonnet.
The bonnet of the trunk, yeah. So we needed the ass end of the fucking car. And it turns out that it was only made on a coupe, and a Cabriolet had the same type of bonnet on the son of a bitch, okay? So for those that don't know what the fuck I'm talking about the trunk hood. Or the trunk, whatever, fucking...
The deck lid?
The deck lid, the trunk fucking lid, whatever you want to call it, man. Anyways.
We'll just call it the bonnet.
Don't call it the bonnet. So, I ended up, literally spent 8 hours one day going to Google Maps and just moving across...
No, the bonnet is a hood. What were you thinking?
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's why it didn't sound right. Either fucking way.
The trunk.
The trunk.
Trunk
yes.
lid.
Hey, there it is, the trunk lid. So, turns out I needed the fucking trunk lid, and it's only on the Cabriolet. It's only on 3 years, and it's on coupes, right? Well, you can't just find this fucking car. It's ridiculous. So, I literally moved, like I literally went to Google Maps and I just moved it, and I looked for vintage lots, vintage car lots, junkyards, and I spent 8 hours one day calling. I couldn't even tell you, like 2 pages worth of these names, name after name after name after name after name,
And that's what
of
it
these
takes.
vintage fucking car lots, these vintage damn places, so I could find this. And guess what? I didn't find it. I found some 42s and 46s and 48s and 7s and whatever, but I didn't find exactly the coupe or the cabriolet. So I was all shit out of luck, because the only part I needed was the ass end parts of this thing, man. So this is what it takes to source fucking parts. And for me to give you an exact direction on where to go, you just got to start hunting, man. As shitty as that sounds, and I can't be any more clear to you, like, that's just the way it is. But when it comes to carburetors and stuff of that nature, you know, you can find some old school carburetor people and shit that you can get some information from. I talked about this, I think, one of the other podcasts, Mike's Carburetors. They fucking know it. Every time I call them about something real rare, I can call them and they can at least tell me what I'm looking at and at least point me in a direction. 9 times out of 10, they tell me to just take it off and replace it with something. It'll just be easier. But they're like, we'll sell you a kit. We'll try to make you a kit up or whatever. But if you got something real, real rare or real, real old, and it's a carburetor, Mike's Carburetors. Can't remember where they're out of, but literally it's just called Mike's Carburetors. And find them on YouTube. They have a pretty nice website and all that stuff to go that fucking avenue. But that's the best thing I can tell you about sourcing parts. What about you, Randy? You got anything you can add about sourcing parts or anything of the nature? You think we're good on this topic?
No, I mean, whether or not you're doing a restoration or a custom car, nowadays there's a lot of different avenues you can take for the rare and far and in between kind of parts. Yeah, you're going to have to do a little bit more research and go on a Facebook Marketplace and go on the forums and, you know, the Facebook groups and find the weird websites online that, you know, they sell these type of things. But for the most part, you can go to Summit Racing or Jegs or eBay.
I feel like Facebook group pages, like I got that 58 F100 me and the wife have, and you can literally like find group pages. Now they call it the fridge, and they're like fridge part swap. Now the shitty thing is, when you get on these, if it's a rare thing and people know it's rare, they're going to charge you fucking arm and a leg for it.
Yeah, it depends on what the go-in rate is nowadays with certain things. It's just like with anything, it depends on what the average market price is. It's really all it comes down to is it worth it for you and your build?
Yeah.
If it's worth it for you to spend the money on that part for your build, then go ahead. You know, sometimes you can even find parts, you know, from O'Reilly's, you know, or your local parts store. It depends on what you're working on. But if you're working on a 50-something Studebaker, you're not going to find your carburetor gasket down at O'Reilly's.
When me and the wife were living in Tennessee, we had an old school parts place that was like tucked off in the middle of town. And you go in there, and it's fucking as old school as it gets, man. The guy behind the counter's got a big old fucking dip in, and he's got a spittoon right behind. You know, you go in there, he's like, hey, what's going on today? And he fucking, and I mean, it was nastier than shit. But this dude, like, he had all this old stock left over that he just kept.
New old stock. If you find new old stock, that's the gold mine.
Yeah. Well, he had point systems that
right.
I didn't even know existed until I tore apart this one distributor. And it's like, damn, how am I going to find this damn thing, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. It's 5 minutes down the road. Are you shitting me? Turns out it's 5 minutes down the road. Well, it turns out not only does this old school dude have a bunch of parts and stuff, but he actually could custom make me fittings, hydraulic fittings, radiator fucking hoses, random shit he could make me, right. AC lines and stuff of that nature. Mm-hmm. And it was badass, because then I could custom make it, and I could just call him up and he would do it. And not only that, a lot of times I could call him and question him, because he's seen this shit since he was, you know, probably 12 years old, and he was working in this damn store.
Right.
So I could call him and question him something, and he would be like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you buying that part? What year is it? Why are you buying that part for this truck? Or why are you buying that part for this fucking car? Are you sure it's not a 12 and not a 10? It's like, oh, well, now that I look at it, yeah, it is a 12, not a 10. So,
and those are the people you want to find.
Yeah.
People you're like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
This is what you should be doing.
Right. And that's not going to be called advanced auto or O'Reilly's.
That's the difference between, the haters out there, the people who actually know what they're talking about.
But that's just because they've been ingrained in it for fucking 35 years, sitting behind the counter bullshitting with people forever.
Yeah.
These are the type of plays it's probably going to be sketched out going in there. They might have the coffee pot over there in the corner where the fucking 3 old guys just come in there every morning and bullshit.
And the fridge looks like it's like 60 years old.
Yeah, and the soda machine, those old school soda machines, that old school Pepsi shit, And instead of having like a new logo in there, it's just like a piece of fucking tablet paper that's wrote Pepsi.
Yeah, and their sink that used to be white is like a nice brownish color.
Oh, it looks like coffee, but they don't throw the coffee shit in that one. It's just junk and dirt. It's nasty. But
that's what it's all about.
That's the place to be at, man. That's the place to be at. So that's the best part. That's the avenue of finding some parts and some random shit. Like you find a honey hole like that, and the old dudes at the parts store. If you go in there and you ask something for a small block Chevy, and they don't ask you what year vehicle you're working on or anything, that guy could be a friend.
That's your happy place.
Yeah, that's your happy place. Because if you ask for anything for a small, like you call up, let's say you're doing something custom and you got some new age brake system, and you call in and you say you're looking for this brake system, and they're like, well, what are you working on? Well, I'm working on a 1970 whatever.
What's the VIN number? There probably wasn't. Well, in the 70s, there probably was a VIN number, but back
you give them a VIN number, and they're like, well, it's not, the VIN number's not big enough. Well, yeah. I'm not.
If you're working on something from the 40s, there was no VIN number. It was most likely a cast number off the engine.
Yeah.
But, no, that's not going to happen.
Right. Those are the places, like we were saying, the Facebook. If you can just go to Facebook and search your type of vehicle that you're working on, you're going to find some groups that have a lot of, it might not be knowledge, because if there's one thing about Facebook, there's a lot of bullshit going on around there, and that's basically 95% of it. The whole fake news things, well, that goes with the hot rod world.
They're just trying to make some money.
Yeah. Finding parts and sourcing parts is a gray area, but you can just be a little cautious, and you'll know when you're getting screwed. You'll know when you're getting screwed. But we're going to wrap up on that topic, but the last topic we wanted to talk about is the difference of knowledge. The different knowledge base. We kind of dove into that a little bit here with the parts bullshit, but we're talking about the knowledge base it takes to use new products, new disc brakes, and new masters, and new fucking whatever, new AC systems, and new electronics and stuff and EFI and stuff, as opposed to everything working mechanically and everything working off a vacuum-based system.
Yeah, like we said in the maybe like an episode or two ago, like if you're using EFI, there are certain extra steps you have to take to make it work. If you're using a throttle body injection system instead of a carburetor, you can use your stock tank depending on what kind of sending unit you have, but you'll have to add a return line and things like that. And if you're just using a carburetor, you can also use a fuel pump for that, or electronic fuel pump. But if you're using a mechanical fuel pump, you have to make sure that's in working condition. But if there's a couple of different options you have with that, go full EFI or go electronic fuel pump with your mechanical carburetor. You have a few options with that. If you decide to go a certain route, make sure you figure out what you need to get.
Yeah, because when we're talking about like an old school mechanical system and vacuum system, like you got to remember your mechanical fuel pump's also running a lot of vacuum shit. That vacuum that's coming off of that fuel pump could be running your wipers or whatever the fuck. Or it could be you're pulling vacuum off your carburetor to work your damn system, as far as like the old school GTOs. They had the open and close headlights.
Right.
That was all vacuum operated stuff.
Corvettes have those.
Yep.
They're all vacuum operated.
I can't remember if they're running off the carb or if they're running off of the actual fuel pump, the lower part of the fuel pump or not. I don't know. They're pulling vacuum from something.
Most likely it's either going to be the intake or carburetor, because the way the Corvettes work, they have to have vacuum to hold them closed.
Okay.
I don't know about the early 60s, but in the 70s it's that way.
Right.
I'm not an expert on Corvettes, but I know that their hideaway systems, their vacuums are controlled by holding them closed.
Right. That's the same. It goes for like disc brakes and drum brakes. Everybody wants to put disc brakes on their shit. Everybody wants, like, I believe it's just the visual aspect of things. But if you're just trying to drive the damn thing, then you can just, like, if you're not trying to go crazy, the drum brake is going to work just fine, man.
Yeah, if you're running the stock drivetrain, drum brakes, if it came with drum brakes, that's what it was designed with. If you're not doing an upgraded engine or anything like that or more horsepower, there's no reason to really do that except for visual reasons or for ease of replacement if you're not mechanically inclined to replace drum brakes.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're actually talking about drum brakes as opposed to disc brakes, we have this conversation like once a week, it seems like.
Yeah.
About the area, the actual braking force and area that's being touched. Like a rotor system, you got two small pads on each side.
People don't realize that a drum brake is you actually get more surface.
Brake surface, I guess.
Brake surface, yeah. Brake pad surface to drum, or versus brake pad. Well, you have two brake pads on one rotor, but the difference in that is actually pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they warp. Because of the way that they fucking work.
Yeah.
As far as a disc brake goes.
Yeah, and if you're just cruising down the road, drum brakes is really, they'll work just fine for you.
Well, not only that, I mean, if you're not going to be hammering the fuck out of this thing, like even if you are hammering the fuck out of this thing, you can get drum brakes at period correct that are upgraded.
Yeah, there are kits nowadays depending on what kind of vehicle you have, they sell disc brakes that actually have a cover that look like drum brakes.
Yeah.
So there's that option as well.
Right. I mean, the biggest concern with your drum brakes is the brake bleed. It gets so fucking hot. You get a squishy pedal with them, and you don't want that if you're fucking ripping it around. But if you're going to be ripping it around, you're trying to drive some sort of, if you're trying to rally cross this damn thing, or what's the word? I'm not rally cross. What am I looking for?
Autocross.
Yeah. If you're trying to autocross the damn thing, you should be upgrading everything anyway. So we shouldn't even be having this fucking conversation. And if you're trying to rally cross or fucking autocross something, the last thing you're trying to autocross is a restoration.
Right.
Yeah. Jesus. But this is the different type of knowledge you need, because if you don't have the knowledge, then you're going to just get rid of the drums and replace them, but you can use the fucking drums.
Yeah, and if you're trying to hold a cross, or let's just skip that. If you're upgrading the engine and transmission and rear end,
then you should definitely do disc.
Then upgrade the brakes. And if you're doing like I just said, if you're doing an LS versus a stock style engine, like an inline six, yes, a disc brake conversion would be. I would highly encourage that.
Yeah,
because.
Well, those inline sixes, I mean, they're torquey, but they're not going to go 115 mile an hour.
Yeah, anytime you're doing modern upgraded drivetrain, you have to upgrade the brakes as well. If you got to go fast, you got to stop fast.
Fuck yeah.
Or you'll hit something fast.
Right, right. And, that's the same thing, the electronics and mechanically, we touched on that 6 volt, 12 volt bullshit, that's the knowledge base. Like, I don't even like working on 6 volt shit. I'll work on it, but I don't work on it enough to be like, what, this is justifiable to have, because it's not fucking reliable at all. You got to remember your whole vehicle is hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just don't like that. I don't like that concept. I don't like that idea.
Right. And that was all fine and dandy 50 years ago.
Right. Well, the reason they did that, it was all because of the spark plug. There's argument about that. You know that?
Explain it.
So the spark plug goes positive to negative, one way or the other. So when it was a positive ground, it was the ease of the spark plug travel. Like when its spark went off.
Right.
That's why the 6 volt system was created. The positive ground was created, because that's how the spark plug system worked. Because actually, when you have a spark plug now, it still operates the same way, but there's just it converts positive and negative.
Right. Well, your coil amplifies electricity.
Right.
And that your coil needs to be grounded. But back in the day, it was probably the point system, right? I mean, I don't know much about points because me personally, I like custom and upgraded stuff. So.
Oh yeah. No, I mean points. I mean,
I haven't dealt with points very much. I'm just
just
throwing that out there.
I think the funnest thing about the point system is just making that shit work. Like the concept is fucking. It's just got a cam system and it opens and closes. You know,
it discharges.
Yeah.
When it opens and closes.
Yeah, it's got a condenser and the whole fucking 9
Yeah.
yards in there. But it's I mean, I can't get fucking crazy technical without having a little bit of a blueprint in front of me. Back to the fucking 6-volt positive ground. The whole concept was because of the way that the discharge in
the way the electricity flowed
through
Yeah.
the spark plug itself.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could get into more fucking detail about it, but I can't. That's all I got.
Yeah.
But you can look into that because, you know, these are just tidbits of information I found over the years, and it's fucking interesting to me, and I find that, you know, it might be interesting to somebody else. But as far as points go, as far as the point system shit goes, like, that's another thing. You got to have a different knowledge base towards that. You got to know how to set dwell. If you don't know how to set dwell on some of these distributors, you're just going to sit there and fucking be like, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing.
I'm not getting spark, and I don't know why.
Right, yeah. Like, I have no clue why this isn't running. Well, your dwell's off. Well, what's a fucking dwell? Well, these are things that need to be answered. And these are questions that need to arise.
So stay tuned. We'll get into that. We'll have an episode about about dwelling, about dwell and
About distributors and all that bullshit. I don't know if that needs to be like a YouTube fucking thing.
no, actually, it probably should be because that's more visual.
Right. But no, we're gonna bring her on home right now. So basically, our key takeaways for this episode was trying to give you guys a better perspective of now that you got the fucking vehicle home, what direction you really want to go with it. Like, yeah, the restoration side's all fine and dandy, and your buddies might be telling you, yeah, keep it fucking stock, man. You know, don't do this, man. Don't you got to keep it stock. No, you don't.
Well, I feel like you don't hear that as much nowadays.
I do. Maybe it's just because the people that I've been around over the years.
Well, I feel like you've personally have been around more like concourse and
The
more
nut
like
and bolt
nut and
side.
bolt restoration. I mean, for me, I've been a lot more
Full-blown motherfucking custom.
full-blown custom. We definitely come from the same background, but we've gone down different paths.
Well, we didn't even talk about going to car shows and swap meets.
Yeah.
Like, you can go to swap meets. Okay, so if you're going to like a specific C10 or, okay, Auburn's here in Indiana, and they have an Auburn swap meet. But just because it's an Auburn swap meet doesn't mean it's going to be right for your car. You know, somebody could just be trying to sell you something there and just trying to make money. Not saying specifically at the Auburn place, but I've seen swap meets where it's like, yeah, he tells me that this son of a bitch is going to fit, but then you bought it and you left and you drove home, and guess what? Now you have a part that doesn't fit what the hell you were telling them.
And it's either wall art or you got to resell it.
Right. So I guess that's probably why I didn't even talk about swap meets. But you might be able to find that diamond in the rough at a swap meet.
Yeah, you really have to get lucky with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're finding something pretty specific.
I'm glad we talked a little bit about that because I wanted to say something when we were doing fucking parts and did. But these key takeaways, the biggest takeaway you need to think about is like, yeah, these parts might cost a lot, or you might want to do a restoration style or whatever. But at the end of the day, if it's fucking running and driving, it looks good, guess what? You're going to be having a hell of a lot more fun running and driving than you are waiting around for a part just because you're trying to make your homeboys fucking happy about, you know, you're keeping it stock. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If you want to do restoration, maybe you should buy a car that you're going to have fun with and kind of do the more custom pro mod, fucking whatever style, resto mod, and have a full-blown restoration on the side that can be drawn out 10 years. Because let's face it, if you're doing it at home, it's going to take that fucking long. Let's be real about it here. I think that's why a lot of vehicles are sitting there, because they're trying to go that original route, and it's like they hit a fucking wall.
Sometimes the project outlasts the person trying to do it. Mm-hmm. Which is sad, but it's the way it goes. And then ends up getting, handed down to the relative or next guy. It's just the way it is. Some people just, it gets in the way of their life, and it's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of let it go by.
Right. But yeah, on that fucking note, we're going to roll out of here. Cue the outro, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to like and share and subscribe. And if you guys have anything that you want to hear us talk about, just reach out to us. You can email us info@I.B.F.HotRods.com. You can go to the website, find us. You can find us on all the social media outlets. Find us on the TikTok, the Instagram, the Facebook, the YouTube. You can find us all over the place. And more specifically, down in the show notes, you can find information on how to get a hold of us. And if there's something you guys want to hear about, or you want to hear what we have to say about something, then shoot us a note. And don't forget to tell us what you liked about this episode in the show notes and the questionnaire. And if you're on Spotify, if not, if you're on all the other podcast avenues, rate and like and comment and all that stuff.
Yeah, and whether or not you're working on a restoration or a custom car, just get out there and do it.
Hell yeah.
Just get out there and start working on it.
Yeah. Well, that's the fucking way it is, man.
Yeah.
So, like always, cheers to you guys out there. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of It's All About the Build podcast. Please comment and let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel to follow along, and if you haven't already, check out our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok to keep up with what we have going on every week. Thank you all for listening.